Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NTMA Technology Team's 2017 webinar series. Today's webinar is Don't Be a Sitting Duck for Cybercriminals. We're honored to have our National Associate members, Eric Ski and Randy Romas of CliftonLarsonAllen, presenting our webinar today. Eric is a principal in CLA's manufacturing and distribution practice, a group of professionals who serve approximately 4,500 small to medium-sized privately held manufacturers and distributors across the United States. The group provides accounting and advisory, outsourcing, and wealth management solutions to organizations and the individuals who own and lead them. Randy is a principal in the CliftonLarsonAllen Information Security Services Group and has been a consultant for more than 18 years with a strong background in computer technology, physics, and education. Randy leads a team of technology and industry professionals providing IT audits and security assessments for clients in a wide range of industries and diverse operating environments. He is responsible for the continuing development of the open source, Unix, and Windows applications used in all of the security audits. Today you've joined this webinar in listen-only mode. So if you'd like to ask questions, please use the question or the chat box to the right of your screen, and we will answer your questions following the presentation. So without further delay, here is Eric to get us started on cybersecurity risks and mitigation strategies.
Thank you, Pam, and depending on where you are sitting in the country, either good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. And Randy's really going to take us through today's presentation. But as we were preparing for this and talking with the NTMA staff, a few different comments came out of this discussion that I really wanted to kind of reaffirm up front and make sure we focus on as we go through today's discussion. One is, I think all of us on this webinar are understanding of the significance of cybersecurity and cybercrime in today's environment. But what I wanted to reaffirm is the fact that we tend to think of the major hacks, and we tend to focus on those. So you've got things like the Yahoo hack that happened in the last year or two. You've got things like the Target hack that happened a few years ago as well. Large target-rich organizations where significant amounts of data was accessed and compromised through cybercrime. And that used to be kind of the holy grail for cyber criminals. The problem is the industry has advanced to a point where right now the NTMA type members, small, less sophisticated IT environments have become the target of choice. Cyber criminals are less prone to look for the big home run, and they look for a lot of small entry points where they can go in, make some quick money, and leave. And so it's just something we need to be more diligent about in our environments and be aware of the fact that there's more of this happening in small company environments today than at any other time. The other thing I want us to remember and think about as we're going through today is many of us on this webinar have outside service organizations that support our company. So we've got network administrators, or we've got clients that host software applications and those types of things. And so we need to understand that those outside service organizations and relationships can also create vulnerabilities. And so as we think about today's discussion and we understand how it relates to our own company, we also need to make sure that we connect with and link up with the outside service organizations to make sure they're aligned with what we're doing as well. Because any vulnerabilities we have, or vulnerabilities that are created with our outside service organizations, really become our customer's problem. Just about every one of the clients we work with have relationships with both suppliers and customers, but oftentimes we have some fairly significant online interactive customer relationships. And there are many examples of NTMA members who have been hacked or compromised, and that compromise has then impacted their customer in a negative way. And we just don't want to see any of that happen. And there's ways we can prevent that and manage that. And then finally, I guess the last point I want to make is when we think about this issue, we think a lot about the technological aspects, the network settings, the other technical issues we have to manage inside of our networks to prevent cybercrime. The other thing I want you to pay close attention to is this issue tends to be a lot more cultural than it is technical. And Randy will give many examples today about teaching our employees and making our employees aware of behaviors that create vulnerabilities can be maybe sometimes our most significant defense against these negative events impacting us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Randy Romas. Randy?
As Eric said, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks, Eric. Lot of really good intro there. So I got a little teaser here to get us started. I do a lot of these in person. I say, raise your hand if you have any of the following. And in the story I used to kind of grab our imagination. How many of you have a Fitbit? Why do we have a Fitbit? Well, we're using the Fitbit to kind of track and monitor our health to improve the quality of our life. It can give us a lot of valuable feedback. How many of you have an Amazon Echo or an Alexa? If you've been watching the news, sometime in the last couple months, a local law enforcement agency asked for a warrant for the Amazon Echo belonging to somebody they suspected of a crime. They thought perhaps that Amazon Echo had recorded conversations that might be useful in their prosecution. The one I really like to focus on here, sleep number bed, and hopefully I don't offend anybody here, but I say raise your hand if you have a sleep number bed. My wife and I got a sleep number bed about 2 years ago, and I kid you not, it saved my life. I had back problems that had been getting progressively worse. Did some therapy, got some feedback from a doctor, suggested something like this, and I sleep pretty good now. If you have a sleep number bed or you purchased one recently, the process is they bring the bed, they set it up, and then there's a little quick start guide, like a lot of things, like the Amazon Echo, like some of this other stuff. And in the quick start guide, it asks you to log on to a website at Sleep Number and create an account. And then it asks you to literally connect your Sleep Number bed to your home wireless. And through the connection through the wireless and the setup of your account, they will help you track and measure the quality of your sleep. Because just like the Fitbit tracking our steps and our health, having a good night's sleep and doing it consistently is an important part of our overall health scheme. So you set this up, and once a month they'll send you an email. Hey, last month your sleep goal was 7 hours a night on average. You only slept 6 hours a night. Let's get to the root of maybe why you didn't sleep so well. And so at this point, I get a little over the top, and I ask the group, okay, how do you think they can determine how well you slept on average? And pretty quickly somebody responds, well, it's probably measuring the tossing and turning at night. Are you sleeping soundly, or are you tossing and turning a lot? Then I ask, well, what else do you think they can tell? And somebody generally says, well, they might be able to track your heartbeat or your pulse. I'm like, yeah, I think they can. And then I kind of jokingly say, what else can they tell? And before anybody answers, say, whoa, don't go there. My wife and I just took a trip out to California. We went to Napa Valley. Do you think they can tell if you're not there? Well, yeah, they probably can. And then, of course, then I get a little salacious. I say, well, what else can they tell? Absolutely, they can tell a lot of stuff. Do you think there might be other parties that want that data? So we use this as an example of how interconnected everything has become. The Internet of Things. Everything can talk to everything. Everything is gathering data and sending data and measuring. We've got self-driving cars that are going to be part of everyday life in the next 5 to 10 years. We have home security systems that other people are monitoring. We We have all these things that can talk to each other, and they're doing it across the internet. How do we manage that? These are all tools. Tools can be used for a variety of purposes. They can be used for good or for the intent they were developed, or they could be used for purposes we had not intended. Again, another news story from not that long ago. Twitter was knocked off the internet. It wasn't really Twitter, though. It was the DNS service provider that Twitter relied on. And what occurred was the bad guys found and took over something on the order of 600,000 video surveillance systems that were connected to the internet with a administrative portal that somebody could log into where those credentials hadn't been changed. So the bad guys take over these 600,000 some cameras, and then they use them to commit nefarious activities. Essentially, they use those cameras to flood that DNS provider with more traffic than they can handle, causing their service to stop. I would venture a guess that many of our NTMA members have some form of video surveillance, video monitoring at some of their facilities. And if we haven't gone through the right steps to secure those devices, they could become part of one of these situations. They could be used to attack others. They could be used to potentially hide activity or just plainly be shut off. So there are a lot of things that come into play here that we may not realize are issues that we have to be aware of. So what's going on here? Why is this occurring? Well, as Eric said, there's a lot more activity in the cyber fraud arena. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And until about 6 or 7 years ago, most of our hacking was driven by people who were trying to show how smart they were. Look what I can do. I'm smarter than you. You can't keep me out. Your prototypical pimply teenage kid in his parents' basement, or a college kid on a campus or university with too much time on his hands. Well, about 6 or 7 years ago, organized crime figured out how to make money at hacking. And so they have moved in and taken over. Their hacking is getting more sophisticated. Some of you have probably received the Nigerian email scam in the past. Great big, long, lengthy email, clearly not written by somebody with English as a second or third language. Well, today's modern versions of that are very well written. There are no misspellings, and they can be very convincing. The activities are getting more and more hands-on. When I was on that trip in California with my wife, I got a phone call, somebody claiming to be from Windows. They had detected a problem on my computer, and they wanted to help me fix it. So they were going to walk me through over the phone how to download and run something. Because everybody and everything is connected to everything, the size of the organization doesn't matter anymore. The vast majorities of these attacks start out as targets of opportunity. The bad guys get something working, download some code, and then they basically log in and see, what do I have here? Okay, this is a large retailer. We're gonna do this. This is a small healthcare facility. We're gonna do this. This is a small or medium-sized manufacturer. Let's see who they work with. Maybe they've got connections into other parties, or maybe they have proprietary information we can sell to somebody. Within this adoption of cyber fraud as a business model by organized crime, they specialize. So just like we specialize in our quote unquote, just as we specialize in our legitimate business industries, the bad guys are specializing in terms of how they commit cyber crime and who gets involved. And there's a very significant black market economy, the dark web, that supports all this. Bottom line, everybody's a target because we're all connected. And the vast majority of these cyber fraud events have email phishing as a root cause. When we look at what the bad guys are doing, what they're going after, there's 3 or 4 categories of things. The first one is literally just information. could be PFI, it could be PII. For a manufacturer, it could be some form of intellectual property, a formula, designs. It could be customer lists or strategic plans. They've found they can steal this data and fraudulently reuse it. Retail, most of the activity is focused still on stealing credit card information. Education, they're focused on PII and PFI to set up fraudulent identities and fraudulent credit. Same with the large personnel breaches. Healthcare breaches can be going after health information, but again, most of these healthcare entities have financial information as well. When we look at our manufacturing clients, it's really the information either related to what it is we're producing. Can that be stolen and provided to somebody else? Or what I'll touch on a little bit later here, just interference with your operations. Can they interfere with your operations to the degree that you will pay them to get them to stop? What we have here is a high-level outline of the breach that occurred with Target. And I point this out for a couple of reasons. The first thing to look at is the timeline itself. The Target breach, we became aware of it kind of in that Black Friday shopping holiday period. The breach started in September. So there's about a 3-month time frame from beginning to end. These events take time. The bad guys need time to attempt to break in, to successfully break in, to root around on the inside and find what they want and execute the activities they want. In this case, the breach didn't start with Target. It started with one of those third-party service providers. Target had an HVAC service provider who managed the store HVAC systems as well as the refrigeration units. And that third-party service provider had remote access into the Target networks. The bad guys broke into the service provider first, most likely through some form of random phishing, which gave them a foothold on the service provider's network. The bad guys observed where they were and figured out, hey, this service provider has access into this large retailer. Here's what we're going to do. And so for about 2 to 2.5 months, they work on getting from the service provider into Target, which they finally do. And then they proceed to spend their activity and time migrating from where they had their initial foothold, the refrigeration units that were on the network, to the point of sale systems where the credit card transactions took place. And then they began siphoning up and stealing credit card data. So there's a couple of interesting things here, a couple lessons. The time period is important. That time period is also an opportunity for us to recognize, react, and respond and stop the activity before it goes too far. It's tied to a service provider. We got a service provider with remote access in. We need to make sure that they are at least as secure as we are, if not more so. Thirdly, this is an Internet of Things breach. That service provider had access to the refrigeration units so they could monitor them and manage them and control them and perform their billing. Just like the Amazon Echo, the Sleep Number Bed, the Fitbit. Their devices connecting outside to a service provider sending data back and forth. So, at the time, people didn't think of this as an Internet of Things breach, but I've kind of drawn this back together here, and it is. It absolutely is. Next category we have, and this is a little more relevant to some of our privately held businesses, is this concept of a corporate account takeover. What do all of these entities on the screen have in common? They all have people who use computers to interact with their finances and their financial institutions. They all do online electronic payroll. They do accounts receivable and accounts payable. All of them had a cyber fraud event where they were breached and lost money through some form of fraudulent transaction because the bad guys took over their bank account. More and more of these occur and end up in litigation. Party gets breached, the bad guys steal money, the party wants their money back. The bank says, I'm sure you do, However, the breach occurred at your organization. The bad guys logged in with your username and password the first time with the right password. They didn't guess it 40 times before they got it. The logs indicate that the connection actually came from your organization. So they tunneled through your organization. You had the breach. You owe us. More and more of these go to litigation. We don't hear about them as much. And when they go to litigation, what they end up arguing is this clause in the Universal Commercial Code, which is what governs electronic payments between businesses and banks. Were the controls commercially reasonable? So we're going to look at two quick examples here to kind of get a sense for what we're talking about. In the first instance, we've got a contractor who gets phished. Somebody in finance gets malware downloaded. The bad guys take over the finance person's account, log into the bank, and they steal $300,000 through a fraudulent ACH payroll file. In approximately the same time period, a day or two later, somebody at the contractor tries to log into the bank to do payroll, and they can't get to the website. The website's down. They get a message. So they call the bank. They say, I can't get in to do my payroll. Payroll's really important. I can't miss that date. What do we do? Bank says, no problem. Here's what we want you to do. Produce your payroll file manually, print it out, bring it into the bank, and we'll go ahead and process it. So Randy prints out the payroll file, brings it into the bank, hands it off to Tom. And Tom says, no problem. We'll get this processed by the end of the day. Tom's never met Randy before in his life. Randy leaves. What does Tom do next before he processes the payroll? Tom looks up the contractor in the system, calls somebody up and says, hey, somebody just dropped off a payroll file. Is this legitimate? Sally answers the phone and says, yep, we just sent Randy in to drop the payroll off. Great. Verified who it was. What was the amount of the payroll? Well, it was $300,000. Perfect. We verified the authenticity, the authority of the transaction and the amount. We'll go ahead and process it. Problem is, when the electronic payment went out, no callback occurred. So the contractor argued, your controls are not commercially reasonable because you're not following them consistently. Therefore, they don't exist. So in this case, good news for the contractor. They found in favor of the contractor. The bank had to give them their money back. In the second example, we have an opposite situation. Real estate company gets phished, finance gets taken over, $400,000 stolen. Same process plays out. The lower court finds in favor of the real estate company. The bank argues in appeals that the real estate company didn't prove the controls were not commercially reasonable. And what they indicated was, when the real estate company signed up for e-cash management, online cash management, treasury management, whatever you want to call it, we, the bank, had a risk conversation with the real estate company. Here are all the controls we have at the bank. Here are all the controls you must have at your real estate company. Here's an intermediate set of optional controls that we, the bank, strongly recommend you have. And the real estate company zeroed in on that and said, optional? Does that mean not required? We don't have to do them? The bank said, that's right. They're optional. We strongly recommend them. Real estate company said, well, that's great, but we don't want to employ those. They're too onerous. They take too much time. We don't have enough people to have segregation of duties. We don't want to pay for this additional level of service for security controls. We don't want them. Bank said, no problem. Just sign here acknowledging we had this risk conversation and that you accept the risk of not employing these controls. So the bank did a good job of documenting the risk conversation, the understanding of the risks involved on both sides, and the real estate company's acceptance of those risks. The court reversed the lower court's decision, found in favor of the bank, and in fact ordered the real estate company to pay the bank their legal fees. What I tell all of our clients and prospects here is you don't want to be in either one of these situations for a whole host of reasons. Number one, that $300,000 or $400,000, all the industry data says that's 1/3 of the cost of the breach. That's simply the dollars lost out of the account. That does not incorporate legal fees, incident response and forensics, increases in insurance. changes in processes, and on and on and on. If the bank has an intermediate set of recommended controls, I tell my clients, figure out a way to employ them all. If they want to charge you $20 a month for a token, pay for it. It will never be more expensive over the life of that service than one of these breaches. Pay for it. The next main category, and this is much more prevalent now even than a year or two ago, is this concept of ransomware. In the news about a year ago, Presbyterian Hospital in LA announced that they had paid the ransom. They had gone 2 weeks without having access to their computer systems. The malware got into the network, it encrypted key data files and systems, and they could not use their computer system. So at the end of 2 weeks, they paid the ransom, $17,000. A lot of times in person, I'll pause here and wait a second because somebody always asks the next question. Why only $17,000? Like, that's a great question. Would they have paid $170,000? I would guess they probably would have. They might have waited another week or two. Would they pay $1.7 million? Maybe, maybe not. Would they pay $17 million? No way. This is the McDonald's model of cyber fraud and hacking. How does McDonald's make $1 billion a year? They sell 10 billion hamburgers and they make 10 cents a piece. The whole idea here is to make it just inconvenient enough that it's easier for you to pay the ransom than it is to try and fix it yourself. Most of these start out as a phishing attack. So here's an example of a phishing message I got a while ago. There's all kinds of problems with this message. Now, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but if you can, I'm kind of focusing in the group of people here that this is sent to. I, as the recipient, look at this and say, hey, this is a really unusual grouping of people to get this message. I got a construction consulting partner, I got a healthcare partner, I got a tax partner, I got people in very different geographic locations all getting this message. Number two, down in the body, there is nothing in the body of this message that tells me what this is or why I'm getting it. So I don't know what this is for or why this would be sent to me. Number three, the link down here, if this were an actual email message and I put my mouse over it, a little context box would pop up showing me that it doesn't really go to Xerox. So that's a problem. And number four, I'm one of these goofy IT guys. I pay attention to some of this stuff. We don't use Xerox devices at CLA. We use RICO. We always have. So that doesn't make sense. So there's plenty of telltale signs in this message that don't make sense to me. Last of all, these ransomware malwares, they're almost always delivered as a zip file like we see here, or an Office document, Word, Excel, maybe a PowerPoint or a PDF with a password. The antivirus software can't look into zip files, can't look into a password protected document. So they're hoping that I just open this without paying attention. If I open this without paying attention, the malware is going to run as me, as Randy. So whatever rights I have, the malware has. And it's going to go right down my file directory here and encrypt everything it can find and then leave behind the message, pay us your money. What do we do about this? Well, for email, we need filtering capabilities. I'm going to jump back 2 slides real quick and talk about filtering capabilities and users that are aware and savvy. We need the email filtering systems to look at this and say, hey, you know what? This didn't really come from LarsonAllen.com. It came from somewhere else. So that's one way this could be filtered or blocked. The email filtering today should be able to look at this link and say, this doesn't really go to Xerox.com. We're either going to quarantine this message, or we're going to strip the link out, or we're going to do something else to make an alert. We're going to look at this and say, you know what? We don't allow zip files anymore, so we're going to strip the zip file out. So those are all filtering capabilities that could mitigate the risk of this message actually hitting Randy's inbox. let's say it does get to Randy's inbox. I already talked about the things I should recognize to say, hey, something's not right here. I'm not going to open the message. Unusual grouping, nothing in the body, link doesn't go to the right place. I shouldn't be able to get a zip file. There are some configuration controls you can take back to your IT folks and say, hey, are we doing any of these? Software restriction policies, App Locker, and EMET, those are all features and functionality that come with Microsoft. Software restrictions and App Locker are there by default. All you have to do is turn them on and then manage them. EMET doesn't come by default, but you can download it for free and then turn it on and manage it. The other one here, I kind of skipped over it, minimize user access rights. If Randy has local administrator rights to his PC, then when that malware downloads and runs, the malware has local admin rights. So it's going to have full access to this local disk here. It's going to be able to encrypt all my files in my operating system and lock it up. If Randy has admin rights to other systems on the network, those things will be able to be encrypted out here. I don't know this for a fact. This is speculation, but I'm pretty comfortable in speculating on this because I've seen enough of these. The reason that I think Presbyterian Hospital had to pay the ransom is because their backups were stored somewhere out here on the network in a place where the malware could get to them and lock up the backups as well as the data files. Once your backups are locked up, you're done. You have to pay the ransom or find a backup that isn't locked up. So when we talk to clients about this, there's a distinction I want to make. You go back to your IT folks or the firm that manages your IT and you say, do we have working backups? And 19 times out of 20, what are they going to say? Yeah, we do. We run this and we do that, and it tells us they're good. And so say, how do you know? Well, we run reports. They say they're good. And we have to pull an email back out or an Excel file because Bob misplaces those or deletes them all the time. Well, that's file recovery. That's not system restore capabilities. So what we're talking about here is backups that provide full system restore capabilities from the metal up. That means they should be able to take a box, shut it down, wipe it clean, reinstall the operating system, install the applications, and then reinstall good, clean data. And those backups need to be in a place where the malware can't get to them. It's okay to store them out on your network, but that location where they're stored has got to be locked down like it's Fort Knox. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to have backups that are offline as well. Pause there for a drink of water. We're going to talk about some more phishing examples. Phishing is the way this works. Here's an example. And the reason I show this one is everybody should recognize this message. We all get an email from our cell phone provider now. Your bill is ready to be viewed and paid. So the bad guys know what's expected. What's wrong with this message? Well, again, I've got an unusual grouping of people. Why are 4 or 5 of my colleagues getting an email message about my cell phone bill? I've got myself, my wife, 2 teenage sons, a mother-in-law, and a data tablet on my data plan. My cell phone bill is ridiculous. My cell phone bill is never $2,300. Good God, what did my 17-year-old son John download this time? That is designed to cause alarm and make me act quickly without thinking. View and pay your bill. Where does view and pay your bill go? Well, we don't know unless we put our mouse over it and we get this pop-up box. dancingdivaswear.com/Robin. That's not Verizon. That might be interesting to go to. I wouldn't recommend it. That site's been hacked and it's downloading and serving up malware. So, really good looking message. It's got the right colors. It's got the right logo. But these links, they don't go to the right place. The bad guys know what's normal. They know what's expected. They're trying to catch us in a weak moment. Look at our next example. This is an example of what we call a persuasion attack. Now, and this is big money here. What occurs in this case is the bad guys broke into the CEO's real private Gmail account. And then they lurked and they observed and they saw what the guy did. Who do we have? Oh, he's a CEO. He's conducting business with this email. And pretty shortly after that, they concoct this scheme. So they send an email to the CFO or the controller. And the gist of the story is this. Hey, we're about to do a deal. We're going to buy a business in China. We're working with this Big Four consultant. His name is Bob. Bob's contact information is below in the email. Please get with Bob right away and wire the money for the transaction. We need to do it right away so we can close the deal. Oh, by the way, you can't tell anybody or we'll violate SEC disclosure rules and confidentiality agreements. And the controller fell for it and they lost $17 million. Number one, never use email for sole method of authorization. Ensure that the recipient has verbally validated with the source. So again, there's a wide variety of methods to perpetuate these social engineering, these cyber fraud attacks. As organized crime is doing more and more of it, they're trying to get more efficient. Have you ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can with Frank Abagnale? What did Frank learn early on in life? If I walk and talk like a pilot, I dress like a pilot, and I show up at the ticket counter, they treat me like a pilot. The bad guys are employing more and more social engineering to make their activities more efficient. We can make your computers bulletproof. It's easy. We encase them in cement and we drop them in the swimming pool. The problem is then the people can't do their work. What the bad guys have figured out is it's really hard to break a well-configured firewall, but we give our users access to all this stuff. It's much easier to convince them to give up the access that they have. And so social engineering attempts to do it. It relies on the appearance of authority. It relies on the fact that people want to avoid inconvenience. I call this taking on 2 minutes of inconvenience. And it relies on timing. We catch people in a weak moment. So two examples of that. The first is a pretext phone call. As I said, when I was on that vacation in California, somebody called pretending to be Windows, trying to fix my problem. What we see with businesses is they'll call up and pretend to be a service provider. Hey, it's Bob from Comcast Business Support. There's a problem with your internet connection. You might not even recognize it right now. I need 5 minutes of your time. We're going to go through a quick troubleshooting procedure. Your IT guy Dave said he'd let you know I'm calling. So if he told you, great. If not, we need to get on this right away. And through the phone call, they will try to get the user to either give up user ID and password or get them to go out to a website and download and run an update. So if I call Sally, Sally's got access. She's on the inside. All I got to get her to do is visit a website, download and run an update. Looks like a Microsoft update. It's really remote access code for me. Another example, and we do see this happen, is showing up in person. I've done this before. Hi, my name's Randy. Bob said he'd let you know I'm coming. I'm here to fix the printers. They usually say, thank God you're here. Will you fix this too? Yep, we can fix everything. We can install keystroke loggers. We can plug in thumb drives or leave CDs behind. We can plug in a wireless access point and go do our hacking from across the street. This works because people don't know any better. They don't follow procedures. Who would actually do this? And there are examples of this in banks, which I have here. I've seen examples where we came in to do an assessment or help somebody because something was unusual, and we found wireless access points that had been put in that nobody knew were there or why they were there. So the physical security of our facilities is really important because if somebody can get past that initial barrier, the IT systems are fairly accessible on the inside because we think we've got locked doors and we got a firewall. What could go wrong on the inside? So what do we do about this? Well, at a high level, and I've touched on some of this, we need users that are aware and savvy. Again, we have to give our people access. They need to know what the rules are, why the rules are important, what their role is, and then the systems can be hardened and configured to support them. Everybody's got a role. The users have to be able to recognize the fraudulent emails, the phone calls, or the other things that are unusual. And you know, I hear this from time to time. I hear people say, "Well, we can't expect our people to do this." I disagree. There's nowhere they can go work where they don't have to be able to do this. Everybody's got to have passwords. Everybody's got to use email. We've got to be better about giving them permission to take on the 2 minutes of inconvenience to recognize that something's wrong with the email and stop and think and do something about it. Once they do that, we can harden our networks on the inside. Now, you know, as Eric said early on, this is not just a technical problem. This is a culture and a people problem. The technical aspects of it, you know, a lot of organizations say, "Oh, how can we keep up with all this?" Well, when we help some of those organizations, what we find is a lot of the basic blocking and tackling just hasn't occurred. And so I tend to talk in terms of an 80-20 rule. You know, there are a couple of things you can do that address 80% of your problems. Some basic blocking and tackling that really raise the bar and make it harder for the bad guys. When I'm not doing this, I do a lot of Boy Scout stuff. I've got 3 kids in Scouts. We do a lot of outdoor activities. When we do our extended camps, you know, we have to do black bear safety training because a lot of the places we go to, we've got black bears. And so we do the black bear safety training. The kids go through it. The adults go through it. When we're done, the adults turn around and we joke with each other and say, "Okay, guys, remember, we don't have to be faster than the black bear. We just have to be faster than the slowest scout or the slowest adult." Well, one of the things we want to think about when we talk about hardening these networks and taking care of the basic blocking and tackling is we don't have to be bulletproof. We want it to be just hard enough that the bad guys go looking for an easier target. The last piece we got to think about is not if one of these bad things happens, but when, because it's going to happen. So within the users aware and savvy, they need to know what their roles are. They need to know how to recognize. We need the IT systems hardened and configured and tuned and managed to minimize the attack surface and make it resistant. Then we need to tie it all together with the ability to recognize when it didn't work and what do we do about it. I'm going to talk a minute here about kind of the low-hanging fruit, the things that make it easy for the bad guys. That awareness training needs to occur regularly. We need to have disciplined, standard-based IT operations. So we don't just turn things on or install things when somebody wants the latest new whiz-bang. It's got to fit within our standards. Within those standards, the problems we see most often, we give our users, Sally, Tom, local administrator rights on their computer. Why do we do that? Well, most frequently it's done to make it so that the applications run easily without any conflicts. If Sally's a local admin on her PC, everything works, everything can talk to everything because she's got administrative rights. It's more difficult to set her up as a non-privileged user because then we've got to make sure that her profile can talk to the things it needs to talk to without having admin rights. Another big problem we have, especially in small organizations, is the domain administrator, the person who has super user rights on the network. They don't use a separate account for that. They have one user account. It has super user rights. And the problem with that is they use that to log in the morning, to read their email, to browse the internet, and to interact with everything else. If they visit a malicious website that downloads code, or if they open an attachment with code in it, that code has domain administrator rights. So it's got rights to everything right away. What we need is those administrative personnel to have 2 accounts. One general, non-privileged account that they log in with in the morning, that they use for email and browsing and just mundane activities. And they have a second privileged account for their admin tasks. They right click and run as, or they RDP, remote desktop, into a system, and they use the admin credentials to RDP. They do not use that domain administrator privilege to do their initial login, their day-to-day activities. We see weak and shared passwords. One of the things I talk about now is the idea that we don't want to think about passwords anymore. We want to think about passphrases. You choose a password as long as you can make it. And the way you choose a long one you can remember is you pick a passphrase. So if your office or desk is like mine, there are pieces of paper or documents around that probably haven't moved in quite a while. When I look in my office, I've got an old flyer, something that was a magazine article from many years ago. It's just sitting in plain sight. It hasn't moved. Twin Cities Business Monthly. So the next time I have to change my password, I look for something like that, hidden in plain sight, not on a Post-it note, and I use that as my passphrase. So next time I get forced to change my password, I might change it to Twin Cities Business Monthly. The first 3 to 5 times I have to type it, I have to stop and look and see where it is. Oh, there it is. But after about 3 to 5, 5 to 8 times, my fingers remember. I remember a phrase like that, natural language, is easy to remember and it's easy to type. It's long enough that somebody isn't going to guess it. It's long enough that if the bad guys get into the system, it's really hard, if not impossible, for them to programmatically crack it. Other issues we see are poor patching. What does that mean? Well, Microsoft comes out with advisories for things to be fixed the second Tuesday of every month. It's called Patch Tuesday. Microsoft has the most mature, well-defined process out there. All of the other software providers, their process looks random in comparison to Microsoft. So one of the things we need, regardless of the size of the organization, is we need a disciplined approach to patching and change management. We want new updates, new features. We need a disciplined process for that. We need to know when the advisories and patches are available. We need to download and vet them to make sure they don't break something. And then we need to install them in a timely manner to harden and secure our systems. There are a wide variety of tools and services out there to do this for you or to employ internally, but you have to find and implement something that works for you. We see unnecessary ports and services. What does that mean? Well, let's say we go out and we get a new software platform and a service provider comes in and implements it, puts it on our systems. We want to make sure that that new application is only running the components that we really need within our unique business processes. So for example, at our business, we may do monitoring and alerting using a service called SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. Well, the service provider has 4 different ways for that monitoring to occur so that when they implement it, it works wherever we employ it. You know, Joe's company uses SMTP, ours uses SNMP, a different company uses syslog. The vendor wants their product to go in seamlessly, so all of those are turned on, so it's seamless. When we have this system implemented within our environment, we want the services that we don't need turned off or disabled. For each one of those we turn off or disable, we are eliminating a doorway in. We are minimizing the attack surface. We are making it so there are fewer components and less complexity for us to manage. We see weak or no encryption. This is a problem where we've got mobile, portable devices or confidential or sensitive data. How we employ encryption is really going to be dependent on the risk involved with the data being exposed, as well as the types of systems that we're using. We talked about lack of security awareness, so I'll skip 10, but we talk about vendor systems. I touched on the first one, a vendor brings in and installs a system internally on our network. The other side of that is when we push our data or our processing out to a hosted vendor. So all of these things I've talked about, guess what? The vendors have the same issues and challenges. They need to be able to operate in a secure manner as well. Now, most of our clients say, well, that, you know, they're a service provider, they're the biggest provider in this market. They must have it figured out, right? We're going to them so we can depend on them. Well, guess what? They're often, shockingly, not any more secure than you are, especially if nobody is insisting on it and holding them accountable. So when we talk about insisting and holding them accountable, we want some proof from them. They need to have some sort of audit or assurance activity performed periodically that they can provide to you to say, you know what, we're secure. We've got this SSA 16 SOC engagement that occurs once a year. Here's the report. We have penetration testing done regularly to make sure we're keeping our systems up to date. Here's our incident response and disaster recovery plan for you to review so that we can make sure that your incident response and disaster recovery activities line up with and integrate with ours, because we have your data. So when something occurs, we need to work together to ensure we get you back up and running quickly. What you need to do is really assess your risks. You know, some of the stuff that we see now is really focused on your key sensitive data. You need to understand, where is that data? What form does it take? What safeguards do we have in place? I tend to refer to this as the crown jewels. So those backup files for system restore capabilities are critical data, whether it's customer lists or strategic plans or, you know, intellectual property, designs, formulas, etc. We need to know where that data is, what controls are in place. Strongly recommend you find those things and audit the file permissions. You should do vulnerability scanning of your systems as often as you can administratively manage it. Those external facing systems, to make sure that, you know, we've turned off the services we don't need, to make sure that when Patch Tuesday rolls around, there aren't new vulnerabilities that we don't know about. For the internal systems, you scan those to make sure the patches are being applied and that things have not been introduced because of new updates or features or functionality that need to be turned off or secured. You should consider some form of independent testing of those systems. A penetration test is designed to validate that systems are behaving the way you expect, that the risks are being mitigated in a manner that matches your expectations, and that there aren't things that you don't know about that could be taken advantage of. Social engineering testing takes that another step, where we pretend, hey, it's Randy from Comcast Business Support. We need to download and run this update. Or you can do a true breach simulation. So you really employ somebody to try to break in to get to those crown jewels, and you use it as a means of measuring whether or not your staff are aware and savvy, your systems have been configured and secured, those responsible for monitoring are doing it effectively, whether it's in-house IT, or even more importantly, if it's that third party you've employed to do your monitoring for you. So the red team is the team that's trying to break in. The blue team is the team that's responsible for monitoring and preventing. And when you do that, the blue team should not know about the nature or the timing, so that we don't artificially raise their awareness. When we talk about those service providers, we need to make sure that they are living up to our level of risk management and control. So here's our standards. Show us how you're employing those standards. If you're not sure, get somebody to help you define your standards, and then to make sure the vendors live up to those standards as well. Don't assume they have them. insist on proof. Your proof can take the form of an SSA 16 SOC engagement. It could be them showing you that they are PCI compliant, credit card security standards. It could be them showing you that they're ISO certified. There's a wide variety of ways to do it. You need to understand what it is they're giving you and make sure that it's relevant or it applies to the pieces that are specific to your needs. So in the end, we need to assess our risks. What is our risk related to where those crown jewels are? What is our risk related to how our people use email and browse the web? What are our risks related to those third parties we're interacting with? Either the ones we're giving remote access into our networks to manage our systems, kind of like the target breach, or what is our risk related to that third party where they're hosting our systems in the cloud? How secure is the cloud? Well, guess what? The cloud is no more or no less secure than what you're running inside your environment. It's got all the same set of controls. We need to verify that they're properly employed, that the permissions are appropriate, and somebody's monitoring it. Get to the end here. There are more slides at the end that are reference materials. This is where I pause for questions, and I make a little joke here just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. This stuff is manageable. The low-hanging fruit can be addressed. Okay, I'm an optimist. We can do this. It's just like this picture. How many of you feel like this right now? Well, it was really hard to get my son to pose for this picture. The good news is, I'm going to grab the mouse here, he's still hanging on, and we're coming in for a landing, so the ride's almost over. There's a lot of things we can do to manage this better. The first resource, I'm going to skip a page or two ahead here, really important. We can harden our systems, and the hardening checklists are already out there for us. You don't have to figure this out on your own. Center for Internet Security offers hardening checklists for everything under the sun. So if you're using a SonicWall firewall, they have a hardening checklist for it. If you have an Exchange email server, they have a hardening checklist for it. If you have wireless infrastructure, you're using Google Chrome and tablets, they have hardening checklists for all that stuff. That's all I've got. So if there's any questions, happy to answer them either now or if you want to email questions later. I got one question here. Do you recommend or support Apple Keychain and or biometric security? Good question. We need some method to manage all the passwords. The consultant's answer is it depends. You've got to be aware of the risks for each one. And I'm gonna dodge a little bit. Instead of Apple Keychain, let's talk about a very popular one that's used right now. It's called LastPass. Well, guess what? LastPass announced a couple of weeks ago that there was a serious exploitable vulnerability, and it took them about 2 or 3 weeks to roll out the fix. Now, I employ a lot of very paranoid security people, and they all tried to shut down their LastPass piece, and what we found was that was very difficult to do once you started using it. So whether you use something like LastPass or Apple Keychain, you got to understand and recognize where are the holes or gaps, what happens if it's not available, and make sure you have kind of workarounds for that. As far as biometrics goes, again, it depends. It depends on how it's being employed and what the risks and shortfalls are. I use an Apple laptop, brand new one, and it's actually got a fingerprint reader. So I can unlock that laptop with the fingerprint reader. If for some reason the fingerprint reader is not working, I can still use my password. So I've got a fallback. The only thing I don't like about fingerprint readers is once the fingerprint's been read, what does the computer do to that fingerprint? Well, it digitizes it and it passes it to something else. at some point, when there's enough biometrics being used and perhaps, you know, a small enough standards in place, the bad guys are probably going to figure out a way to intercept or take that over. And now I got a real problem, because if it were just passwords, I can change my password to anything. If they steal the thumbprint from my right hand, I only got 9 fingerprints left that I can use. So I suspect at some point that may become a challenge or an issue we got to figure out. If we're using biometrics to read a face, facial recognition, guess what? You can't change that. One of the powers of facial recognition is how accurate it can be and how hard it is to defeat, but you can't change that. So there are pros and cons to both. You really need to look at what your risk is and what you're trying to safeguard against before you decide which way you're going to go with those. That's a really good question. The other thing I'll say about like keychain and password managers is you do got to figure out something. I have hundreds of passwords, and so I've developed a bit of a personal discipline. I do not use LastPass. What I do, all of my passwords are stored in an Excel file. That Excel file is not named passwords. It's not stored on my on the desktop or my documents. Within that file, I probably got about 300 of them. There are 6 that are key or critical to me. I've got my CLA password. I've got 3 banking or credit card passwords. And then I got 2 or 3 other kind of personal or security services passwords that are really important to me. Those 6 or 7, I've developed a personal discipline religiously. Whenever CLA makes me change my password every 90 days, I take the 10 minutes, 15 minutes it takes to change the other ones. So those 6 or 7, they're as long as I can make them. They're never the same, and I change them on that schedule. The other 300 passwords I have I don't care about. They're a variation of the same password, and I never change them. If you want my Star Tribune password, you can have it. In fact, when you use it, you get in there, pay the bill for me, please. It's not important to me. So I've developed that discipline. So whether it's my process with the Excel file, or it's the Apple keychain, or it's a service like LastPass, they do very similar things. You got to figure out which one works for you, and where are the risks or the bottlenecks, so you understand them and you're not left out in the cold when something isn't working. I think that was the only question that was there. If people have other questions, they can certainly send an email or give us a call. We'd be happy to respond. Eric, anything you want to close with?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. I want to Randy, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us here at NTMA. And on behalf of the NTMA technology team, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. This webinar has been recorded, and it will be available for viewing on the NTMA website. And while you're on the website, check out some of our upcoming webinars as well. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.